Greetings and welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you could be here. Before we begin, please remember this. If you enjoyed this content, please consider hitting that like button, dropping a comment, sharing this video with a friend, and subscribing if you haven't already. Now, on with the story. The Deathworlders by Philip R. Johnson, aka Hambone, Hambone HFY, and Hambone 3110. Chapter 19, Baptisms, Part 1. Author's note. Zhu Chang was originally introduced by the excellent Hume Reddit, and her saga forms part of the essential reading order. Although Hume decided to bow out of writing her story, they were kind enough to ask for it to be continued as part of the Deathworlders. Date point, 2 years, 8 months AV. Diplomatic Shuttle, docked at Kerbvlewek Galactic Shipping Interstellar Cargo Way Station 832. Ima. As always, Zhu wasn't in her bed when Ima awoke. Ima's human sister had gotten into the habit of waking early so as to exercise under the punishing gravity of her homeworld before Ima and Regari awoke, and had been sleeping restlessly for the last few days in any case. She had taken Triman's death hard. They all had, in their way, all blaming themselves for the innocent, broken little sister's untimely end. Ima had berated herself for not making Triman feel more welcome, for not being more sisterly to her. Regari, enigmatic, handsome, driven Regari, had redoubled his endurance training, spending longer and longer on the treadmill, as if by training himself until he could keep pace with a human, he might somehow, in some small way, undo what had happened. Ima had seen Zhu's grief before. The human tended to go quiet, curl up somewhere dark, and sob until somebody dragged her out of it. This time was different, and she had been puzzling over why for some days. While Zhu had gone quiet, it had been the kind of quiet that Regari had mastered, as if she was being silent so that she could watch without disturbing what she was watching. That worried Ima, and so, checking on Zhu had become the first task of her day. Regari growled something and turned over in his sleep as she padded past him. He really had been beating himself up recently, and Ima didn't doubt that his muscles were aching and fatigued from it, though this was the first he'd actually shown of it. Well, that and being the last awake. That wasn't like him either. There was something off about the ship. They had docked last night at a private corporate cargo relay station to take on basic supplies, synchronize with the Galactic Data Network, degauss the hull, and generally tend to the business of keeping their ship flying. Now, in the morning, it seemed eerily still, and colder somehow. Maybe even quieter. That was it. Zhu was not a large person, but the characteristic density of a Deathworlder meant that when she was moving around, the whole ship vibrated just a little bit. She wasn't heavy, she was firm. That was the word. The ship trembled a little whenever she went inside of it, as if it was just a little afraid of her. Ima loved her sister, but having felt the full force of Zhu giving her an angry Deathworld glare, she could relate just a little. There was no music either. None of that raucous, pulsing noise that Zhu liked to pollute her personal space with when she was alone and could get away with it. Only one thing caused her to pause as she headed towards the gym. The cabin that contained the modified cargo container with its salvaged stasis field generator that served as Triman's coffin until they could somehow get her back to Gao, and to a proper funeral. She always paused by that door. The gym itself, however, was dark and empty. When Ima experimentally waved a hand over the threshold, she didn't feel the tug of any extra gravity. "Shu?" she called. "She's not here either?" Ima flinched. Regari raised his paws apologetically. "Either?" she asked, grabbing the important word. "You woke me up," he explained. "When I went up to the galley, her cloak and disguise were gone." Their eyes met, then simultaneously widened, and they scrambled back towards the sleeping cabin. Regari beating there despite his battered muscles. Ima didn't need to get there first, though. She was already feeling the urge to make a mournful, keening noise, and the impulse only grew stronger when she saw the open compartment under Zhu's nest bed. Zhu didn't own many personal effects, but they were all gone. "I'll check the security footage," Regari said. Check every compartment, just in case. It was something to do, but Ima didn't need to look very far. Glancing into the room containing Triman's coffin was enough. This time, she really did give voice to her sorrow, and the noise soon attracted Rigari. Resting atop the coffin was a datapad, projecting a short, simple message. I'm sorry. Take care of yourselves. I love you both. Goodbye. 2 years later. Date point, 4 years, 9 months AV. A motel somewhere along I-84, Utah, USA, Earth. Kevin Jenkins. Cimbrean's appointed governor, Sir Jeremy Sandy, was quick to dismiss any suggestion of blame, stating the damage was beyond any reasonable prediction. The footage of decaying foliage and the aerial shots of creeping brown pestilence cut to the image of a silver-haired man who looked like he hadn't been getting enough sleep, standing at a podium in a garden under grey English skies. I came to Cimbrean for many reasons. The future of humanity as an interstellar civilization, to realize the ambitions of generations of dreamers, and to preserve its unique biology for posterity and the benefit of the human race and others. The thought that we are going to lose it all, and that the biosphere of the entire planet was doomed even before the first colonists set foot on Cimbrean, is gut-wrenching. But the fact remains that, devastating though this tragedy is, it is not the result of an act of malice. The circumstances of this disaster were uncontrollable, therefore we shall not be naming the person responsible, nor apportioning blame. There is none to apportion, as they could not have foreseen or avoided this outcome by any realistic means. The governor paused significantly and adjusted his glasses as he looked directly out across the crowd and at the cameras. Blame will accomplish nothing, and if nothing is accomplished, then Cimbrean will die. It is that simple. The footage cut to Sandy shaking hands and standing alongside other politicians for the press as the reporter continued. This morning, the Global Representative Assembly's Office for Extraterrestrial Policy issued a statement confirming that the search for other potential colony worlds would remain essentially unchanged. The statement was displayed even as it was read out. Although the news of the ecological disaster on Cimbrean has of course been taken into account, the Assembly's survey of potentially habitable worlds was already focusing on so-called Deathworlds, which are more likely to be well-suited and resilient to human habitation, including being better able to resist the kind of microorganisms which are behind the Cimbrean tragedy. The footage returned to Cimbrean, showing teams of scientists patrolling the affected area in protective clothing, sampling the ravaged greenery. While the decision to supplant Cimbrean's native species with ones from Earth has attracted widespread protests and accusations that the colony and its sponsors and the British government have failed to fully explore the available options for containing or reversing the bacterial spread, it seems likely that the plan to import Terran plants and animals is set to go ahead. The British Prime Minister has already pledged the continued support of his government to Cimbrean despite criticism from the opposition that saving Cimbrean will be a waste of time and money. Kevin didn't recognize the next man on screen, but he was clearly a British politician. Nobody else could wear a bad suit, bad teeth, and bad hair so comfortably. Everything we've seen and been told about the galaxy says that there are literally thousands of planets out there waiting to be claimed, most of which have ecosystems much less fragile than Cimbrean's and gravity much more suitable to our needs. So this so-called terraforming project seems to me a case of throwing good money after bad, especially in today's fragile economic climate. A commentator gave their opinion from him in front of a green screen depiction of the New York skyline. Have we really exhausted all the options here? Because as far as I can tell, the situation on Cimbrean went from A-OK to apocalypse overnight. Where's the in-depth investigation? The planning? He raised his voice to shout over interrupting objection of his opposite number. I don't believe that a whole planet is so fragile that he can write it off the second some hiker takes a comfort stop in the woods. Screen time was then given to the person who had tried to interrupt him. The criteria laid down by the Interspecies Dominion for classifying a planet are well established and clear. I know, she paused as she was interrupted, and the footage cut to her continuation. I know it's hard to really get your head around the idea that our own home planet is so incredibly deadly, but all of the samples and information coming back from Cimbrean so far, all the abductee accounts, All the scientific resources we now have access to all point to the fact that we're statistical outliers right onto the far end of the bell curve. The next speaker was clearly being interviewed in his office and had the air of big business around him. It wasn't long before his name was displayed at the lower edge of the screen, proving him to be the CEO of some company or other. Moses Byron. Cimbrean isn't going to be abandoned for one simple reason. Oil. It has a lot of oil. Sure, we may be moving more and more onto using solar energy collection fields to power our cities, but we've got a lot of cars still on the road that aren't about to stop running on gasoline anytime soon, and we're never going to stop needing plastics. Cimbrean represents an opportunity for the West to break our dependence on Middle Eastern and Russian oil, and this ecological disaster doesn't change that. In fact, it represents a golden opportunity. If we're replacing the ecosystem of an entire planet with one of our own design anyways, then we don't need to worry about the conservation and preservation efforts that, well, I don't want to say hamper industry on Earth. Conservation and environmental preservation are obviously hugely important, and I don't want to give the impression that I think they're bad things, because I don't. But if Cimbrean's already written off, then there's no longer any reason we can't have huge GMO farms over there, growing crops in low-pest environment, meaning a gargantuan food surplus for Earth. The same goes for drilling, fracking, or open-cast mining. The incentives that exist not to do those things on Earth no longer apply to Cimbrean because the fatal damage has already been done, so we can stop damaging our own planet and make the best of a tragedy. The reporter asked a question directly to the interviewee at that point. Don't you think that's a cynical way of looking at it? The businessman gave an uncomfortable little exhalation. I won't deny that you could call it that, but I don't think I'm being cynical. I think I'm trying to look at the ways we can turn a bad situation to the good, he said. Sure, it sounds heartless at first glance, but at second glance, I'm talking about the opportunity to wipe out famine, to limit the damage we do to the Earth. Imagine if we never cut down another inch of Amazon rainforest ever again because we've moved those tree species and their logging operations over to Cimbrean instead. That's got to be better than just letting one planet die while we continue to wound the other, right? He shrugged, sat back and folded his hands in his laps. If that's cynical, then guilty as charged, I guess. Kevin stopped listening as the reporter signed off and sat back thinking as the anchor segued into the next article about a recall of translation implants, scratching idly at the bald patch in front of his own temple where his own crude version had been installed. Supposedly the first one custom built for a human nervous system. Eventually, he reached a decision. Still doesn't seem real. Date point: 4 years, 9 months, AV. Cimbrean Consulate, London, United Kingdom, Earth. Sir Jeremy Sandy. Sir Jeremy became aware of his aide, Jack, entering the office and reached forward only reluctantly and took his time removing his earphones and turning the music off. He'd been enjoying a few moments to himself. Jack. Mr. Moses Byron will be here in 5 minutes, Sir Jeremy. Already? Sir Jeremy sat back, folding his hands on his stomach. I know the man has a reputation for alacrity, but... He has a reputation for buzzing around like a blue-assed fly, sir, Jack smiled. I understand that he got in his jet the second you agreed to see him. And a reputation for being such a straight-talker that you could draw a triangle with him, Sir Jeremy finished. Shall I keep him waiting? Sir Jeremy thought about it. The presumption on his time was a little irritating, but, on the other hand... Ordinarily... No, thank you, Jack. See him directly in when he arrives, will you? And have some coffee ready. Yes, Sir Jeremy. Sir Jeremy cleared up a few letters and some of the shorter reports as he waited. Moses Byron was a self-made billionaire, a man who had stepped out of the relative obscurity of the business sector within the last 4 years, already with a few million to his name, and had put that money to work in spectacular fashion, capitalizing on all the domestic terrestrial opportunities afforded by the discoveries coming out of Scotch Creek and the universities as the secrets of alien technology were unpicked. Byron owned the production of volumetric projectors, stasis field generators, solar collection fields, and at least 2 kinds of alien-derived power storage cells that promised to give the latest generation of smartphone a full month of life when charged. Thanks to him, The near future promised to contain true 3D cinema, the stasis fridge, self-sufficient electric cars. He also, to the public's delight, seemed to be an intensely moral man, unafraid to court controversy by telling the truth as he saw it. Sir Jeremy had an immediate mistrust of the man, but rose to shake hands when, after a few minutes, Jack opened the door and ushered him in with a soft, "Mr. Moses Byron, Sir Jeremy." The handshake was crushing, and Moses himself was loud. "Hey, so I got a question. Do you mind if I call you Jerry, or do you prefer Sir Jeremy?" he asked. "I prefer Sir Jeremy, if it's all the same to you," the governor replied, retaking his seat. "Then Sir Jeremy you'll be, and sorry for asking." The twinkle in Byron's eye said that he knew that he was playing to type, and that no force in the galaxy could induce him to care even a little bit. Sir Jeremy congratulated himself on predicting that Byron, for all his bluster and bluntness, would turn out to be deeply shrewd. Two could play at the excessive directness game. "So what do you want, Mr. Byron?" he asked. "I saw you on the news, giving the impression that you rather thought you could annex Cimbrean into your growing empire." "And save the world with it," Moses beamed, revealing the kind of white, even teeth that could only be the product of extensive, expensive dentistry. "Very ethical of you." Byron laughed. "Ah, ethical is a product, Sir Jeremy, and it sells so well because it advertises itself. Hell, it's a brand. You Brits have that little red tractor you stick on your food to say it's been locally sourced. Ain't no little sticker for cheap imported stuff made by Chinese kids for a dime an hour, is there?" Sir Jeremy sat back. "Your point being?" Byron shrugged. "Did you read my proposal?" "I did. Despite what you said on TV last night, I really don't see what you stand to gain. Your own proposal is so self-limited that you wouldn't see a return on your investment for decades." Moses Byron grinned at him. "If we're talking about the return on the investment directly from the investment itself, then you're not wrong," he agreed. "But to be honest, how much money does a guy need? I can afford to fly to London on a whim, no big deal. Seriously, I could lose that kind of money in some inventive tax paperwork if I was the kind of guy to stiff the public sector like that. How much more do I really need?" "That's an attitude which is slightly at odds with my past experience of business billionaires," Sir Jeremy observed. "Man, I feel sorry for you. You've been hanging out with the idiot crowd, I can tell. The kind who think profit equals dollars, am I right?" Byron leaned forward. "But yeah, I have an angle, sure. It's just not one that puts me in control of the planet like you're worrying about. That'd just limit me and make me look like the bad guy. And the Byron brand is all about looking like the good guy. Ethical is a brand, right?" "I see. The cynical good guy." "You got it, yeah. I know common wisdom is that people don't like a hard truth, but it's worked for me so far." The meeting paused as Jack entered, carrying a cafetiere, cups, sugar, cream, and some files, which he handed to Sir Jeremy before retreating. "Coffee, Mr. Byron?" Sandy asked, depressing the filter. "Black and sweet." Sir Jeremy poured. "You're creating an opportunity," he said as he did so. Byron threw his hands wide and smiled. "You caught me." "But I don't think the opportunity is on Cimbrean. I think you meant every word that you said during that interview, but ultimately, I think that my planet is just the, he paused, considering how to phrase it, the floodgate that you want opened." He dropped a sugar cube into the coffee. Moses held up 2 thick fingers. When the second cube went in, he curled one of those fingers down. Sir Jeremy poured his own coffee before adding the 3rd cube. "How much money does a man need?" "I'd submit that it's less than you already have," he said. "And yet, here you are. If it was about being the good guy, then you could do that here on Earth. Any charity in the world would be delighted to receive that kind of money. So, why Cimbrean?" "Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, Jerry." Sir Jeremy issued a humorless laugh and added a 3rd sugar cube. "If we are going to prevent the total collapse of Cimbrean's breathable atmosphere, the first step is almost certainly going to be phytoplankton," he said, handing the drink over. But the water is so rich in nutrients that the algae will get out of hand almost overnight unless we have zooplankton and krill to eat them. And unless we want the seas solid pink with krill, we're going to need something that eats them in turn. How do you import a whale? More to the point, he continued, how do you import a sustainable breeding population of whales without harming the whale population on Earth? What complications might arise from that? If the whales we chose migrate to the Caribbean to breed each year, then how are we going to fare on a planet that doesn't have a Caribbean? And that's just the primary school science class version of that food chain, and only one food chain. He poured cream into his own coffee. Nothing like this has ever been attempted. We're bringing on board science fiction writers because they are the only people who have even considered these kinds of scenarios. The expertise and knowledge to make it happen all but don't exist. Before sipping his drink, he looked Byron straight in the eye. There are noble causes right here on Earth that could boost your ethical Byron brand, and Cimbrean, meanwhile, can offer no guarantees that we shall succeed, he added. So, as useful as your money will no doubt be, you appear to be treating me like part of the so-called idiot crowd, Sir Jeremy said. He took a sip, lovely holding Byron's gaze. Not to try my hand at equine dentistry, but I've always preferred the aphorism, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. So I ask again, why Cimbrean? Moses Byron's jovial attitude was gone, revealing the hardened veteran businessman underneath. You're going to turn me down? He asked. I hope I don't have to. As I said, we need the money, and to be frank, I don't care what you have planned. I require only an added clause. Name it. Do you have any neural cerebral augmentation implants, Mr. Byron? Byron frowned at the apparent non sequitur. No. No translator implant or anything like that? God, no. I prefer my head the way the good Lord made it. Good. The stipulation I am adding is that you will provide, under supervision by an observer of my choice, medical evidence to prove that you don't, to be repeated on a regular basis. In the event that you ever do acquire any such implants, any and all property and developments you own within 1 parsec of Cimbrean star will be immediately ceded in their entirety to the Cimbrean colonial administration, or, if that's not acceptable, to a private owner of the administrator's choosing. That's it? Jeremy nodded and sipped his coffee again. While he typically preferred tea, he had to admit Jack prepared excellent coffee. Yes. Well, not to try my hand at equine dentistry here, but what the hell does it matter? Byron looked downright confused by the demand. I'm not at liberty to tell you. Suffice it to say, I'm eliminating an ulterior motive. Byron took a swig of his own coffee to cover his bemusement, then set the cup down on Sir Jeremy's desk. Fine, whatever. I accept the term as given, he said. Have your people call mine. Write it in. Sir Jeremy smiled, shook his hand, pleased to note that Moses Byron's grip was much less certain and strong this time. I look forward to seeing what you have in store, Mr. Byron, he said. Date point, 4 years, 9 months, 3 days after Vancouver. Starship Sanctuary, Deep Space. Allison Bueller. Julian had an irritating habit of cleaning and maintaining his gear on the coffee table in the sanctuary's main lounge, which was compounded by his grumbling that he couldn't concentrate on the job while any kind of entertainment was on. 6 years of having nothing to distract him but staring into the campfire meant that any movie, TV show, game, or anything else on the big screen opposite the couch commanded his attention. Allison had, therefore, waited until he was pretty much finished before poking her head around the door, acutely aware that they hadn't exchanged more than 3 words at a time in a couple of weeks now. Hey, you busy? She asked. He glanced up and gave her a long, cool, evaluating stare before moving over on the couch. Just finishing, he grunted. God, he's sexy when he's pissed. She sat down next to him and put the box she'd brought with her down on the table. He frowned at it. What's this? Peace offering. He blinked at her, then shrugged and twisted the catch on the front of the box. She'd worked hard with Lewis's help programming the nanofactory to produce an almost exact duplicate of a Smith & Wesson 22A. My grandpa taught me to shoot with a gun just like that, she said. I was hoping you'd let me teach you. You said yourself you'd never fired a gun before. What, you want an excuse to rub up next to me on the shooting range? Julian put the gun back down again. I'm not your fucking plaything, Allison. You wanted a perfect peace offering? Well, how about a goddamn apology? Ah! She stood up and left the gun behind. Whatever, Cicity. You want to learn how to fire the thing? You let me know. She was glad that nobody on the ship was between her and her quarters to see her expression. The moment the door closed behind her, she drove her fist into the wall, denting it slightly and bloodying her knuckles, which prompted a round of swearing and running her hand under the cold faucet. That was an apology, you jackass, she muttered. Date point. 4 years, 9 months, 5 days, AV. Sarah Tisdale. The Cimbrean summer was gentler than Sarah remembered from Earth. Back there, even in the notoriously grey and mild England, she'd always had to wear sun cream when the sun was out, and lots of it. She'd always hated it. Cimbrean was much better. Its thick ozone layer and the Cimbrean star's comparatively low UV output, low relative to Sol anyway, combined so that on an afternoon like today, you could stretch out face down on a rock and just feel warm, with none of the burning or dryness. She flinched as water splashed across her back. Hey! Her little brother and one of the newcomers, Stacy, grinned impishly at her, kicked away from the bank, and scrambled backwards toward the middle of the lake to escape her wrath. She let them go and tried to settle back again. They'd come swimming every day since the news broke. Everyone knew that Lake Junkyard was on borrowed time, that sooner or later the bacterial filth would reach it, and they wouldn't be able to swim in it anymore without risking dysentery. Squeezing out every minute of good swimming time before the day the bad news finally came was important. Hey, Adam sat down next to her to dry out in the sun, having swum to the sunken spaceships and back as he usually did. He was really taking his exercise seriously, but he didn't seem to really enjoy just fooling around on the water like most of the others did. He'd arrived late on an ATV of his own and had dived straight in without even saying hello, a sure sign something was on his mind. Sarah had been sleeping in the spare bed in his house while her parents and Ava had been away, and it had killed some of her crush on Adam, replacing it with a solid friendship. After all, who else was she going to talk to? He and Ava were the only others in her kind of age range. The rest of the Cimbrean children were all 10 years old or less, and hardly anybody seemed to be bringing families with them anymore. Hey, she returned the greeting rather more sunnily as she rolled over and sat up. Do you have any news? I heard maybe there's been some word today, but I heard it from Kieran. He wouldn't tell me where he'd heard it, and, well, you know how he makes stuff up. Adam smiled a little, his mood breaking down in the face of Sarah's unrelentingly cheerful motor mouth. No, he said. Stupid military hospital won't share anything with us. Patient confidentiality, they said. But I'm their daughter, and your dad's Ava's guardian, right? I mean, I thought he was, and if he is, then that's pretty much the same thing as being her parent, and don't they usually tell parents about what's going on? Yeah, Adam agreed. But he called the guy he has to deal with, and I'm quoting here, a bureaucratic sadist with a phone pole up his ass. Sarah giggled. Adam's imitation of his own father was uncanny, and not just because they were related. He had Gabriel's mannerisms down perfectly. Is that all he said? Because I've seen your dad when he's having a tough time, and I didn't know half of what he was saying until you taught me what they meant, and I don't see how he could just stop there when Ava's in the hospital and they won't tell him how she's doing. Hell no, it wasn't all he said, Adam agreed, but I'm not allowed to teach you how to swear in Spanish anymore, remember? She laughed again, remembering. The first couple of days of zero contact, not knowing what was going on with all the people who'd been shipped back to take care of their Cimbrean tea poisoning, had been the hardest. By way of trying to find a method to release the stress harmlessly, Adam had been teaching her a few choice phrases in Spanish, right up until the point where his father walked in and just folded his arms disapprovingly. It had worked, though. So, what else did he call him? Come on, spill it. It's not like anyone's around who'll tell us off. Adam chuckled, shaking his head. What about, puto?
Yep.
Pendejo? Plenty of that, yeah. Oh, I know. Did he call him a pinche idiota?
Adam grinned. Oh, yeah, to his face.
Whoa, really?
And then some. The guy stood in Dad's office explaining national security this and discretion that, and Dad told him to metetelo por el culo right there. Sarah was in awe.
Your dad is amazing, she enthused. He really told the guy to do that right in his office? That's so cool.
I know, right? Adam nodded, then sobered. But he said that he regretted it afterwards. Said that he could have gotten more done if he'd stayed frosty, yeah?
I guess, Sarah thought about it. It's been like 2 weeks, hasn't it? Nearly? Yeah, it was on Saturday the week before last, wasn't it? And then, wow, that time's gone fast, hasn't it? All of the scientists and reporters and everyone coming and going and everything?
More of them today. Apparently, some rich dude wants to give us a whole load of money. It's big news.
Oh, yeah, who's the really rich dude?
Some guy called Moses something?
Moses Byron? Mom and Dad talk about him a lot, like they think all businessmen should be like him. They say he's really honest and one of those people who's got money and didn't turn into an asshole, and he's making the world a better place and stuff. He's like the only person in a suit I've ever heard them say something nice about.
Which wasn't exactly true. They'd also been fairly flattering about Sir Jeremy and about Gabrieliotis, but she knew what she meant. Yeah?
Oh, yeah, he does stuff like lobby governments to legalize marijuana so he can. What was it, Mom said?
She concentrated, trying to remember a speech he'd given that Haley had admiringly quoted.
Something like rehabilitate the global trade in drugs and take it out of the hands of unethical pushers. Mom and Dad are really in favor of that.
Adam bobbled his head. I guess that makes sense, he conceded. Unable to think of anything interesting to say, Sarah picked up her camera and focused it on the first thing she saw, other than Adam himself. The reflection of the tree line on the opposite shore was perfect, almost mirror still, and she zoomed in on it. A thought seemed to occur to Adam.
Hey, did your folks ever do drugs like that? He asked. Like what? Marijuana? Sarah asked, pressing her eye to the viewfinder and twisting her telephoto lens.
Yeah?
Sure they did. They said it was part of their whole being in touch with nature thing. They were really big on that. Grandma said the only reason they moved out of the teepee village in Wales was because of the Child Protective Services.
Did you ever? She nodded and hummed in confirmation.
Mm-hmm.
Before smiling sheepishly at him.
Dad used the same number for his pin and for the safe. I figured it out really early on. 3381, his birthday. So when they went out one time, I tried out some of their stash.
She rolled her eyes intently when he gave a dismayed little head shake in response to her answer, but his next question at least showed how open-minded he was. What was it like? Sarah invented furiously. The truth was, she had been sick and scared and hyperventilating too much to tell how much of the experience had been the drug and how much had been anxiety.
Just weird, I guess, she said, borrowing what she'd seen of her parents when they got high. I don't really remember. I just coughed a bit, found everything really funny for a while, got hungry, ate a whole tub of ice cream, and fell asleep.
Didn't you get into trouble? She laughed a little, lining up her camera to take a second picture of the distant trees in case the first wasn't satisfactory. This question she could answer honestly.
Mom and Dad don't believe in trouble, or grounding me or whatever, she said, omitting that they'd gone easy on her in part because she'd had such an awful time. Dad just changed his combination and his pin and asked me to wait until I'm 18.
Adam laughed a little disbelievingly. How the hell did they get to come here, he asked. I thought the first colonists were supposed to be like the best and brightest.
They are, Sarah protested, indignantly defending them. They're both botanists, really good ones, and there was never like anything official. They didn't get caught or arrested or anything like that. As far as the authorities knew, they're a pair of doctors with a bunch of published papers and the best and brightest, like you said.
But you said child protection.
I said they moved out because of it, not because the child protection people ordered them to or anything. They moved out because they knew child protection wouldn't approve, and so they moved out before that happened. My parents are really smart people, Adam.
There was an awkward silence, during which she turned away, cheeks burning, and took an angry picture of the reflection of a hilltop where it blurred and distorted around the swimmers. It took Adam a good few seconds to finally apologize. I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't mean it like that.
No, you did, she said.
People always said that whenever they insulted her parents to her face, and Sarah had long since given up on being upset by it.
It's okay. It just means you don't understand them.
She put the camera down suddenly.
I really miss them, she added. Nobody else around here thinks like they do. Everyone's all closed-minded, talking about banning the tea stems when the plant's all over the place right now and is going to be extinct pretty soon anyways. What's wrong with a little bit of fun? Does it really matter if people are chewing something or smoking it or whatever? Why does that matter?
I don't know, Adam confessed.
See, that's why you're cool. That's like the honest answer.
She sat back and stretched, pointing her toes.
Why do people have to make things so complicated? She asked.
Adam made an interrogative noise.
There's this saying that Mom and Dad like, she told him. And it harm none, do as thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law.
Okay.
Well, what's wrong with that? Why do we need all these rules and stupid laws that just stop people from having fun? Why can't people just do what they want so long as they're not harming anybody?
Adam went quiet for a bit, and she was about to change the subject before he spoke.
People hurt each other, he said. They're not like you, Sarah. They don't hold themselves back just because they were asked all nicely. They'll do things like go to sports events planning to shoot random people in a crowd, or they'll blow up a whole city, or they get drunk and they...
He went quiet again, then started laughing a little strangely.
Adam? Isn't that weird? I can talk about the roller derby. I can talk about the bomb, but I find it harder to talk about Mom and her drinking.
Sarah scooted up to him a bit.
Did she hurt you? Not physically or anything like that. She never touched me, but she said things, you know? Painful things. Yeah, but sticks and stones, right?
No. Adam looked away and scooted away from her a little too. No, I don't want to talk about it. After the awkward silence had gone on a little too long, Sarah finally found the courage to break it.
Want to swim instead? Race you to the big ship.
Race me? Come on. The only way that's fair is if it's a race for me to get back here before you make it out that far.
You're on.
She sprang to her feet and sprinted for the water, laughing at his dopplering, "Hey!" She hit the water full tilt and dived in, still grinning, enjoying the cool liquid feeling of freedom on her skin as she wriggled a few dolphin kicks under the surface. Win or lose, at least she was going to have fun. Date point: 4 years, 9 months, 1 week, AV. Clan Fastpaw Orbital Defense Station, Pride and Vision, orbiting planet Gorai. Gaietan. Brother, what are you doing? Gaietan coughed, embarrassed, and unfolded himself slightly. The Zafu he'd imported from Earth wasn't ideal for Gowans. Humans had longer legs with a slightly better range of motion in the hip and a slightly different take on the theme of spine, but he found a comfortable straight-back position that served the purpose of keeping him steady and centered and pain-free. It's something I picked up from the humans, he said. He rose and embraced his old friend. Tigral had been a cub in the same commune as Gaietan and had followed his sire into the Fastpaw clan, whereas Gaietan had chosen a slightly more wild-card route in life under the now notorious Cheer. Picking things up from the humans seems to be very easy, Tigral sniffed, returning the hug. You should see what the females are eating these days. The mother of my most recent cub seemed to be looking forward to these pancake things more than the actual siring. You don't sound like you approve. Congratulations on the cub, though. We can't ever be Deathworlders, brother, Tigral warned him. I'm worried that even if we try to imitate them too much, we'll forget what being Gowan is like. Gaietan lowered his ears slightly. I don't think we're in danger of that, he said. No? When you're doing whatever that is? He indicated the Zafu candle and incense. Meditation, Gaietan said, using the English word, though it fit awkwardly in his muzzle. There was no word with an equivalent meaning in any dialect of Gowan that he knew of. And what does that translate to? It doesn't. You see, an alien concept, a Deathworlder concept, brother. You're playing with something very dangerous. I know that better than you do, Gaietan retorted, hackles rising slightly. Humans are incredibly dangerous. I've seen it firsthand. So why this? Gaietan looked his brother in the eye and quoted, Ignorance is comfortable, but deadly. Recognize that? No, Tigral admitted. You don't recognize the words of your own clanfather, Gaietan asked. Really? Really? The clanfather said that.
He did. Humans are dangerous, but so is a pulse gun. And what are the first things you learn about pulse guns before you're allowed to even fire one? Keep your claw off the trigger unless you are firing. Always assume that it will discharge. Never aim at someone unless you intend to kill them if you must. Beware of what you might hit should you miss, Tigral recited. Exactly. How to handle something dangerous in a safe way. That's why this, Gaiden said, indicating his meditation equipment again. Nobody knows how to handle humans safely yet. He looked his brother in the eye and repeated the last word for emphasis. Yet. Tigral had opened his mouth to retort, but shut it again, ears starting to droop as he thought through what Gaiden was saying. What is this meditation thing anyways? You sit and think. Breathe in and out slowly while concentrating on the breathing. Tigral blinked. That's all? It sounds simple, doesn't it? Gaiden said. But, well, sit down and try it. Date point. 4 years, 9 months, 1 week AV. Folk the colony, Cimbrean. The far reaches. Sarah Tisdale. Hey, these are good. Sarah beamed. One of the great frustrations of her life this last couple of weeks had been the abundance of real news crews and real reporters to try and talk with, to pry and get some kind of an education from in how to become a journalist herself, and pretty much every single one of them had just chewed her out for daring to address them, or at least shooed her away. It was a real pleasure to meet a reporter who was more than a stuck-up pretty face in a suit who could stand in front of a camera. She blushed happily as the Al Jazeera reporter scrolled through her camera, admiring shots she had taken. It kind of helped that he was handsome, too. Oh, he suddenly examined a few of her snaps with considerable interest. These are some great before shots. We could use some of these for our next report. You could? Oh, yeah, this one. No, this one especially. Hey, you've used exactly the right filter on this. She knew her ears were going pink, but was too happy to really care. Thanks! Tell you what, I think I've got some... Yeah, here we go. This is our standard contract. If you can get your folks to sign this on your behalf, then I can use your pictures and you'll get credited and paid for them. Does that sound good? It sounded like everything Sarah wanted, and her delight couldn't contain itself. She practically bounced on the spot as she took the paperwork and her camera back and dashed away, promising to get the pictures to him ASAP. The mental image of her own name appearing on a global news broadcast had her so distracted that she only noticed the convoy of trucks when a hand grabbed the back of her collar and firmly yanked her back from the road. Watch yourself there, love. Sarah watched the huge vehicles rumble by, thoroughly sobered by the sight of those huge, crushing wheels that she had very nearly run under. Shit, thank you! Captain Powell seemed amused, which was a strange sight on his face. Usually he looked so intense. Oi, didn't your mom and dad teach you not to swear? He asked. Not really, Sarah shrugged. Dad says that fuck is one of the oldest and most important words in the English language, and that everyone uses it anyway, so there's no real point in being squeamish about it. Besides, I've heard you swear all the time. This seemed to amuse the captain to no end. I'll have to watch myself in the future, I guess. You never know what bad habits you might pick up off an old warhorse like me. Wait, I recognize you. You're the one who tried to sneak onto the base trying to take pictures of us. Sarah laughed. Yep. Powell shook his head, clearly still amused, but also clearly wanting to be serious. You know that's all top-secret stuff in there, eh? He asked. All those classified tents and porta-cabins, Sarah teased him. Please, it's not like I actually managed to sneak onto the base. Powell grunted. Yet, she added. By heck, you've got some cheek, he said, but the glitter in his eyes said that he'd enjoyed that to some extent. Seriously, though, you could have gotten into very serious trouble, and the only reason you didn't is because that I'm a fool, a big softy, and I don't want to have to throw that kind of trouble at you. It'd ruin your hopes of becoming a journalist. What, for being curious? Aye, those rules exist for a reason, miss, even if you don't know what that reason is. But if I know the reason why, then the rules wouldn't be needed, would they? She objected. Rules should be explained. Powell gave a rueful shake of his head. I thought you'd say something like that, he said. All right. Would it persuade you not to try again if I just asked nicely? Maybe. He rolled his eyes. Okay, well,
Asking nicely. I'd be grateful if you, seeing as I just stopped you from being run over, never tried a stunt like that ever again.
What's the magic word? Pal made a kind of laugh, one big silent one that rushed out through his nose.
Please,
He said, though his expression was starting to get serious, and Sarah decided not to push her luck.
Okay, since you asked nicely.
Pal stuck out his hand and they shook on it, after which he nodded at the departing rear of the last vehicle of the convoy.
Get on with you then, and try not to become the next Laurie's hood ornament, eh?
I'll be careful.
I hope so. My arm's not that bleeding long. Off with you.
Date point: 4 years, 9 months, 1 week AV. Starship Sanctuary. Free trade station 1090. Endless possibility. The Marorkwell system. The signal stars. Julian its Cicity.
That was an apology, dumbass.
You're kidding. Giving me a gun is her way of saying sorry? Lewis laughed. He was surrounded by holographic screens, the central one of which was, for now, blank. Around it floated a halo of smaller screens full of notes, useful lines of code, or places for him to write notes. All the tools of the hacker's trade.
Julian, dude, you and Allison are like the craziest fucking badasses I've ever met, but you both suck at being real with each other.
Docking in 10 minutes, Amir called.
Cool.
Real with each other? It was Amir's turn to laugh.
Bruv, I could lean against the sexual tension between you two.
What sexual tension? She treats me like I'm a goddamn toy.
Dude, Lewis grinned. Trust us. She wants you.
She wants you bad, Amir agreed. Oh, come on. I knew girls like her back in high school. They'll flirt and giggle at you and then laugh in your face if you ask them to prom.
I'm sensing a life history here, Amar deadpanned. You're not in high school no more, man, Lewis told him, and that's not what she's up to.
Julian watched him work as lines of code assembled themselves on the large central screen directly in front of Lewis's face. So what is she up to?
Come on, do we need to spell it out for you? Amir asked.
Apparently you do.
Dude, it's simple, Lewis told him. She's nervous around you. She doesn't know how to talk to you.
Give me a break. She's got confidence for years.
All a front, bro.
Amir nodded.
You're shit with girls. She's shit with dudes. You get flustered, get mad at her, and go hide. She gets flustered, doesn't know what to say to you, so she gives you a bit of T&A because she's hoping you'll take the bait.
That's not what she told me, Kirk ducked into the room. How are we doing?
Docking in a 7, Amir said. Piece of cake. They're still using version 2.4, Lewis said. And yeah, I saw that conversation. Pro tip, Kirk. Women never tell the whole truth about what they're thinking.
Sexist, bruv, Amir chided him.
Lewis just shrugged. True, though.
What did she say? Julian asked.
Doesn't matter, Lewis said dismissively. Point being, she wouldn't be acting like that if she wasn't into you.
His screen chirped and he grinned.
In like Flynn, running our sniffers.
6 minutes, Amir nodded. So, what do I do? Julian asked.
Fucking take the bait, dude, Lewis said. She gives you an ass to stare at? Stare away. She wants to get up close and personal on the mat or in target practice? Fucking enjoy it.
Julian turned to the only non-human present. Kirk? Leave me out of this, the alien said. I don't do the whole cliched alien commentary on human behavior thing.
Isn't that itself,
Amir began, then abandoned the question when Kirk gave him what they all guessed was a tired, patient stare. Though the effect was spoiled slightly by the fact that the positioning of his eyes made it hard for him to look at anything nearby with both of them.
Never mind. Docking in 5 minutes, mark.
I still kind of feel like I'm being used, Julian objected. Kirk slapped him upside the head as hard as he could. Mind on the job. You two can sort it out between yourselves. Chastised, Julian nodded. Right, sure. What have we got, Lewis?
Oxygen recycling, grav plate power draw, and
Yep, food ration dispenser bills are all up by a bit next to our population, Lewis said. Right up to a half hour ago. Reckon we've got a human on board, boss.
Good, Kirk did one of his slow nods. We're a long way from Hunter space here, so hopefully he's been able to live openly.
Hey, this is weird, Lewis added.
What is?
Looks like all those metrics spiked by one human's worth about 5 months ago. There was somebody else here, but either they died or moved on, and there's nothing in the census logs about a dead human, so yeah, she moved on.
She?
Yep, definitely a woman. The one still on board is a dude.
Amir frowned at him.
How do you know that? He asked. I programmed the sniffer to check the sewage processor logs for hemoglobin contamination warnings every 4th week. Huh? Blood, dude. Every month. Think about it.
Amir blinked, then realization dawned with an uncomfortable grimace.
Oh, right. 3 minutes. Weird, though. See here? This was just her. Then there's 2 of them on the station for like a week or so. Then it's just him. You think they didn't get along?
Kirk patted Lewis on the shoulder, then turned to Julian. Go get Allison and meet me at the airlock. Get over it, Julian. I need you two working together. You can sort out your when we get back to deep space.
Yes, boss. Something else, Kay, Lewis said as Julian exited the flight deck.
What?
I've synced with the military relay. Look at this.
Lewis called up a graph of 4 writhing colored lines. Piracy, smuggler activity, Alliance scouts, and Hunter raids. The Hunter line became a vertical cliff at a date 3 weeks previously. Kirk leaned in, as if by taking a closer look the data might change. No sightings? No raids? Nothing?
Just this, Lewis zoomed in a little, and a tiny blip on the otherwise flatlined Hunter activity became visible.
What is that?
The whole swarm of swarms, tracked by Kurambura listening post, hauling ass back towards Hunter space at 90 kilolights.
As Kirk looked back up, Lewis looked at him.
What does that mean, dude?
Kirk's forearms described a convoluted approximation of a human shrug. I have no idea, but it worries me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been The Deathworlders, Chapter 19, Part 1. I hope you enjoyed this content as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you enjoyed it, please consider hitting that like button, dropping us a comment down below, and maybe sharing the video with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, please consider hitting that subscribe button down there. As always, shout out to my editor, Graygor. Thank you very much, buddy. I could not do this without you. Okay, as of this recording, it is currently the 4th of October, and I'm in the middle of a big recording push between this and Princess of Mars to try and make sure that I have enough content on the channel to cover while I'm off on vacation. I'll be gone for about 2 weeks. I look forward to continuing when we get back. Okay, question, who's got the question? Okay, I've got a fun one for you. More of a, well, you'll see. Ruin a movie title by adding one word. I'll begin. Lady Hawk Tua. In the meantime, I will see you next time in part 2. Be well, be safe. I love you all. Bye-bye.
Hey, Gregor, great news. I've been cured of the clap.